Welcome to the Authority File, the academic library podcast from Choice, brought to you this week by ACRL. I'm Bill Mickey, the host of the podcast and the editorial director of Choice, and we're very pleased to be talking with Meggan, Houlihan, and Ray Pun, editors of one of ACRL's newest titles, the First-Year Experience Cookbook. This is episode 4 of a 4-part series with Ray and Meggan, and in this final installment, we continue our conversation talking about broader first-year experience trends, and we get at some hard-won advice from the editors. Meggan and Ray are on the line with me via Skype from Shanghai and Fresno, California, respectively. Meggan is the first-year experience and instruction librarian at New York University, Abu Dhabi, and Ray is the first-year student success librarian at California State University at Fresno. Together, they edited the First-Year Experience Cookbook. It's a collection of recipes, which are basically activities for spicing up any first-year experience program. And the First-Year Experience Cookbook is available now online at the ALA store. Okay, so how has the approach to teaching info literacy skills and introducing higher education library services to students changed in the last 5, 10, 15 years? I'm wondering if the process of compiling these recipes for you guys has maybe given you some insight into sort of, or even like a little historical perspective on the practice. Would you say in general terms that it's evolved in sort of an accelerated manner in parallel to the growth of the internet and sort of this rise of the so-called digital native and sort of this reflex tendency to, find everything they need on the web? Have you seen sort of a pattern in that respect with the info literacy skills training?
I certainly do. I'll just speak first for a second, that it's a lot of multimedia learning. It's digital literacy, a lot of schools call it now. They're changing it and evolving it from information literacy to these kinds of literacies. Of course, they also include like visual literacies and all these kinds of different ways of learning, right? And I think what's interesting is that when I'm listening to your question is the higher education and the lower education, so the K-12, and then how they're setting up the students to prepare, during college or during high school. And so one of the things I was thinking about is the Common Core and how that's going to be, especially in the U.S., right? In my context, how it affects how students think, how they assess and access information. And that will play a big role. I think we're sort of getting these students coming in and just wanting the answers. There are no gray areas. It's hard for them to conceptualize and think in that context. So for us, it's like really thinking, how do we break down these silos in terms of thinking, right? And then create sort of this nuanced approach where students are thinking critically about information, but in different perspectives. I think that's what I'm experiencing a lot right now. But in terms of the technology aspect, I mean, you had mentioned digital natives. We see that, a lot of students are more into their mobile apps, mobile phones, and there are several recipes actually that do require access to maybe a mobile device or something, because that's just the way the trends are setting, and a lot of students are very into these kinds of tools. And from my own experience, when I do workshops sometimes, the students don't bring in their laptops and they're going to just access the information through the phone. And I find it interesting, that they're allowed to still get the same information. We have to think about universal design, and we've applied all that in there. But I think it's just going to be changing over time. I think in some ways, some of the materials, the recipes in this cookbook is still grounded on like hands-on activities, or as Meggan said earlier, bringing in these traditional approaches to engage with students, but enhancing them.
Mm-hmm.
So.
And just to stem off what Ray said, I think that our field has seen a lot of transformation recently. We went from the standards to the framework. I mean, in even looking back, I believe the Value of Academic Library report by Meggan Oakleaf came out in 2010. So where where have we been going, right? She asked us all to conduct research and to show that we are aiding student learning, that we're helping with retention. And so I think that we've really made efforts to start focusing on student learning, creating library programs that help retain students, enhance their knowledge, whether, through whatever program it might be. So I think that, yes, information literacy is definitely changing as a field, and how we teach our students. And I think that we're going to continue to see a lot of change in the coming years.
Sure. No doubt about that. And, I think really these techniques and activities that you guys are featuring in your book, are really setting students up for long-term, strategic use of the library and research in general, right? So, I mean, should your readers be looking at these tactics in that light? What are some of the effective ways to sustain that collaborative environment shared by librarians, students, faculty, and the administration, beyond that first-year experience? And, how might readers, take these recipes, but then, keep that momentum going with the student body? Obviously there's more students coming in every year, but as a freshman becomes a sophomore and a junior and a senior, how do they sort of maintain that momentum and connection with the library after that first year experience?
I think that's a really good question. And I actually was just conducting a teaching enhancement workshop today here at NYU Shanghai. I'm actually in Shanghai today. And what I like to say is that when you think about the assessment cycle, so if you think about Meggan Oakleaf's assessment cycle, I think that the first time you go around the wheel, it's informing your teaching. But what I think is that you should also take this assessment data and apply it to your instruction program. So not just change your lesson plan for next time, but what does this data mean to our program? How is this going to programmatically move us forward? Because I think without setting some of these big goals, you might lose sight of what do I really want my students to know? What are they learning? So I think taking the data and incorporating it into an actual library program helps you stay motivated to stay on top of, information literacy and what's happening with your students, and help you develop a program.
I agree with Meggan completely. And also sort of like the follow-up is that when you do these outreach and collaborations, even after the activity or the event is over, you have to really think about your partners, right? How do you sustain that, right? I think that was one of your questions, and I think it's important to go to meetings. Obviously, these are just general ideas that's not. There is no fast rules, but it's sort of like from my experience: go to the meetings, stay in touch, share information, communicate. So it just means that you are embedded in this community. So whether that's student affairs or first year writing or writing center, because that way it signals that you're still here, you're still interested, and you need to start thinking about ways to engage the next incoming students with this partner. So a lot of people tend to think, okay, we just have these meetings and then that's it. The assessment part comes in really handy. Then you have the data, then you inform, then you have a meeting about it with your partners, and then you enhance what you're going to do the next time. So it's sort of like a cycle, right? And that way the way I've done it and seen it, and that way it sustains the partnership, and it also gives more meaning to what you're doing and how you support students in an effective way for those that are coming in the next round.
All right, now we've got to pause a bit to pay the bills. Our guests this week, Raymond Pun and Meggan Houlihan, appear courtesy of ACRL. If you're looking for ways to spice up your library orientation or for activities to incorporate into your lesson plan as an instructional librarian, you'll find a whole smorgasbord of ideas in the First-Year Experience Cookbook. Remember, these are recipes for first-rate activities, not dinner. You can find the book on Amazon or the ALA store. Just search for the First-Year Experience Cookbook. And now, back to our talk with Raymond and Meggan. So let's talk about those partnerships. what, in setting up the activities that you've compiled in the book, for example, what other departments or what are the departments or groups that the library needs to or should partner with, whether it's to help get the word out or even formally integrate these activities into the larger first-year experience programming. Meggan, you mentioned in your bio, actually, that you work with the Writing Center. I mean, are they one of your primary partners? And what other parts of the university have you partnered with most successfully to get these programs out there?
Yes, I think that the Writing Center and the Writing Program have been one of my biggest collaborators and biggest successes at NYU Abu Dhabi. We work on everything from how do you teach first-year students how to integrate sources to how do we help our capstone students, so our senior students working on their senior projects, conduct literature reviews or use data analysis tools to help with their research, right? We think about research and writing in tandem. So what we tell all of our students is that research and writing are in tandem. You have to conduct critical research and to do critical writing. And so they are some of our biggest partners. And actually, Ray and I just had a short presentation at ACRL, and we helped analyze some data from Library Journal and Credo References first-year survey. And what we found is that from over, how many responses did we receive, Ray?
Like 583 or something.
Yes, so of a 583, a vast majority of librarians said their number one partner was the writing program. So that is something to keep in mind, again, that it's not just NYU Abu Dhabi, it's a majority of librarians are seeing that they're their strongest partner. But Ray has actually had some really interesting relationships with his campus partners. So I'll let him talk about some of his other frequent collaborations.
Yeah, thanks, Meggan. I think what's interesting is that I just want to say in the book, there are people, and we've encouraged us to collaborate with your campus partners to write the recipe. So some people, I think there was one written with a provost, I forget which one, and there were some other ones written possibly with a faculty. So it's not necessarily just librarians writing it, but from a collaborative effort. So that's what we wanted to promote too, this collaboration outside of the library that first-year experience librarians are doing. And from my own experience, I, like Meggan, collaborating closely with the Writing Center, but also with Student Affairs. One of the key areas that we have at Student Affairs is the Learning Center. So that's really like a tutoring center, right? We provide like mathematical support or sciences and so forth. They have tutors all over. And one thing I started doing recently was doing pop-up workshops, or just, where I'm just like in the center of all the activities where people are having tutoring, and then they can come in and get help, whether it's finding a STEM article, how to interpret a scholarly journal article, or how do you find a business article, or how do you conduct research, right, in terms of your writing. So it's worked out really well. We've had a lot of people coming in just one-on-one basis, even though that they might forget that there's the reference desk right upstairs, which could do the same kind of service, but it's also really nice to be embedded in that community that has worked out well. And one of my favorite collaborator is the Career Center. So I work closely with them in terms of creating career research workshops, because for me, I think of first-year students, I think of a lot of them thinking about what are they going to do during the summer, right? How can they get a job? How can they get the most out of this experience? And, helping students really think about their skills and what they want to do. I think that's all part of the academic experience, and the Career Center can really provide the necessary resources, the collaboration, and the foundation for that. And when students feel like, they're able to possibly get a job or internship, when they're going to school or like when they're transitioning, I feel like it creates more opportunities for them to really stay in track, because now they can pay for possibly some of the things that they could afford to get. In my school, it's a huge challenge. I will say some students have to decide between paying for a textbook or for rent or for grocery. because it's just so expensive today. And we've done some initiatives called the Affordable Learning Solution, which is using OER, so open educational resources, to encourage faculty to use these online open textbooks and resources that are free for students to use in their classes. So these kinds of activities, I think, stem from my own interest in supporting students successfully through that kind of effort.
That's great. And then, in terms of forming those partnerships initially, any advice that the two of you could give in terms of, what works, what doesn't work in approaching, another department or a faculty member and, creating that partnership in practice. What actually tends to work when you're making that first approach? Meggan, why don't we
I think you have to be extremely flexible at first. My biggest piece of advice to new librarians, especially new instruction librarians, is that, you want to have people in your corner. And that means taking the time to go stop by someone's office, congratulate them on a new article or book that was published, go to their talks and presentations, go to student activities, because you're showing your willingness and that you want to engage. And from that, I'd like you to teach this instruction session at 7 p.m. tomorrow. Oh, that's not really what I wanted to do tomorrow at 7 p.m., but that's going to be great because I know that you are going to be an advocate for me now. I think that you should be an advocate for yourself, but you also want your faculty members and your students to be advocates for the library and your library instruction program. So I think initially being flexible and communicating with all of your stakeholders. So why is it important that the Writing Center is a frequent collaborator with the library? Well, why is that? I'm going to actually tell you why. I'm going to provide data. I'm going to show you the results of our partnership so that, people notice it and, find that they're contributing to something worthwhile.
Mm-hmm. And Ray, what's worked for you?
I agree with Meggan. I think working with campus partners has been really instrumental, but not just like bringing them in, but communicating with your colleagues in the library. Why is it essential to work with these groups? I think sometimes it's hard to sort of engage with others when you're not in the position that we're in. And I think the recipe, all of them, speaks about collaborations in so many ways that it could give you some ideas on how do you build that. From my experiences, of course, emailing, sharing resources, going to meetings and events, especially events that are hosted by students. It's a good way to meet with them and just see what they're doing in a way that you're not necessarily spying on them, but just sort of like, just supporting them, right? You're engaging with their activities and seeing what they're doing. So I think that takes a lot of flexibility and a lot of your own time, but being aware that this is part of the process of being embedded in this community. So I'd say, don't give up. Of course, there are going to be people with really different personalities, and that's the joy of being first-year experience librarian. You don't work with just like one kind monolithic person. You work with many people across campus to ensure that our students thrive successfully in the first year.
You just heard from Ray Pun, the first-year student success librarian at California State University, Fresno, and Meggan Houlihan, the first-year experience and instruction librarian at New York University, Abu Dhabi, who is actually joining us from Shanghai. This concludes our 4-part series discussing the library's role in a student's first-year experience and the new book out from ACRL called the First-Year Experience Cookbook, which is edited by Ray and Meggan. This episode was brought to you by ACRL. You can search for all of the episodes of the Authority File podcast on iTunes and Google Play, or you can find us on the Choice website at choice360.org. Just click on the librarianship drop-down menu. Thank you for joining us today.